with insights into Golut and Geula, into exile and redemption, which is the special significance of Bein HaMetzarim of these 3 weeks. So I want to introduce this with the way in which we can understand the Chumash on a deeper level, as we've often explained. Sages say, Maaseh Avot Siman Lebanim, what happened to the forefathers gives us a direction for later generations. There are many episodes and phrases used in the Chumash which are then, also by the Midrashim and the sages, connected with prophecies of the future, of what is described in the books of the prophets will happen. Either something did happen already in their time of the first temporal period, beginning of the second, or episodes that will happen before the coming of the Mashiach. And we've seen, for example, those who followed the Shiurim, let's say, in the last year or so, that there's clear reference in the Chumash, according to the way it's described by the prophets, to the many years of persecution from all different groups, from the Romans, and then from the Christians, and then from Islam. They're already hinted at in the Chumash, developed in the prophets, but only in reality experienced by ourselves. Including amongst these matters is, for example, the Holocaust, which is clearly referred to in hints in the Chumash, and then developed in the later books of the Tanakh, that what might happen. So, in line with this, I want to give an interpretation on a deeper level of the first Golut that took place in the history of the people of Israel. After we were given the land of Israel, which had taken in possession all the 12 tribes under Yeshua, and then there's a description of many difficulties that arose. We find that the tribes split into 2 groups, the southern kingdom, the northern kingdom. And the northern kingdom, they still were continuing their lives, all the 12 tribes. But they went further away from Hashem than the southern kingdom. And they had more wicked kings and queens than were available in the southern kingdom. They were also closer to true worship of Hashem, while the northern kingdom was constantly jumping between worship of the true God and worship of the nature gods, of the Baalim, which are worshipped by the different nations in the Middle East. Until at the end, there came Sancheriv. And what happened? The people of Israel under Yeshua, or under Moshe Rabbeinu, they started taking possession of the Holy Land. Now, the real Holy Land is this side of the Jordan. But there were 2.5 tribes who had large cattle and sheep. And they thought, we already conquered under Moshe Rabbeinu. was given into our possession the land of Sichon V'Og in Transjordan. So couldn't this become part of the future land of Israel? And if we will take over this part of the land, it'll make it easier for the other tribes to have more possessions, to have a larger tract of land. That was their suggestion. So, when in the end Moshe Rabbeinu agreed, and that's described at great length at the end of yesterday's Parsha. But there are many phrases in that Parsha that seem to be just repeated, or certain aspects, certain wordings were changed. And although many of these aspects have been explained in Jewish tradition, the Midrashim speak about it, I'm going to concentrate on those Midrashim who say that in the end, what turned out, Transjordan also was considered part of the greater Israel, the greater land of Israel. It did not have the same level of holiness as far as all the laws of the holiness of the land are concerned as this side of the Jordan. Nevertheless, it was considered part of Eretz Israel because two tribes took it over, and then also, since there was land over, which is not really properly exploited and used by the population and by the wealth of flocks of the two tribes of Reuven and Bnei Gad. So, in fact, according to some, the suggestion of Moshe Rabbeinu, since Menashe was also a very large tribe, so he suggested maybe we won't have so much land available for all your flocks and so on in this side of the Jordan. So maybe we'll allocate half of it, that half of your tribes can come and settle in Transjordan, which happened. And the idea of Moshe Rabbeinu was another one. He wanted to make sure that these two tribes of Reuben and Gad wouldn't make themselves separate from the other tribes. He didn't want to split amongst the 12 tribes. So he thought, if I'll get Menashe half on this side, half the other side, it'll be a bridge of unity between them. That was the idea behind it. But I want to go on a deeper level. And here we turn to the Midrashim. Midrash means to search the inner meaning of the verses and the phrases of the Bible, especially of the Chumash. So these are the words of the sages. You want to understand what is the debate between Moshe Rabbeinu and it said also the elders, the Nisim, the presidents of the community, which meant representatives from all the 12 tribes were there. And the two tribes came to Moshe and made the suggestion. And it's introduced through the phrase of Miknerav. These two tribes had a very large amount of possessions of flocks, of cattle. Small cattle, large cattle. So the Midrash says, you want to understand this parsha, you should know the heart of a wise man should always turn to the right. The heart of the fool turns to the left. What does it mean? The heart of the wise man is to his right. These are the saints. It's, in English also, the right also means that which is correct. And the left, sometimes even third. That's more of an idiom. The person, he got out of his left leg in the morning. That means it's not doing the right thing, but making mistakes and negligence. This goes back to the etymology. The word right in Hebrew, Yemin, means the appointed purpose. in life. That's the right side. This comes out in modern Hebrew, mamuneh, and so on. Many phrases in Hebrew reflect the same thing, the pointed purpose. And left really means the poison of God. Because God creates negative things in the world, which creates conflicts. But from the point of view of the sages, this is part of the right balance of life. You have to also use negative qualities. I'll give you an extreme example from today, that all civilized human beings know that it's an act of goodness and virtue to save lives, and it's an evil quality to destroy lives. It's an act of compassion to free people from all oppressions, and certainly from being locked up in a jail. But it's a need. If someone comes to kill innocent people, you've got to lock up the perpetrator in jail, if that's good enough, and don't release him too soon if he intends to go on killing. But sometimes you've got to apply the negative in life in order to help the positive. Therefore, the way of the Torah is, if someone comes to kill you, then, or kill other people, disarm him. If that's not good enough, because he's a strong fellow, or maybe he's got a lot of weapons, you can't disarm him, then wound him. And if that doesn't stop him blowing himself up to blow up others, then you better kill him before he kills more innocent people, which is common sense. He wants to preserve life on this earth. But people who are maniacs, or people who act like maniacs, they've got plenty of intelligence, but they've been brain contaminated, some of them for generations, that the greatest virtue lies in killing as many people as possible who don't believe in what you believe in. Yes, and you have to sometimes use the left hand. Anyway, so the wicked people are no people. Leif Kasili Smola, the foolish person, his aim is destruction. There could be actually no better example of this, following the same illustration I've brought, than what took place in the Paris supermarket. The most significant conversation between the terrorist who was holding the hostages, in fact killed quite a few of them, and you know, he gave a chance, different things. And he had a talk with the girl there, and they had a discussion. And what did he say? He said, you know, you Jews, you believe in life, but we believe in death. So this is the battle that's taking place today. Is our civilization going to be based on death and destruction, which means probably the end of the human race, or we're going to be able to survive by emphasizing the evils of destruction and the values of using a life and using all opportunities to help others rather than destroy them. So anyway, they just say, the wicked, that's their aim. The poison of God becomes for them the aim of life. Or sometimes, not just that, the Midrash in fact says people who on this earth are only out for wealth, they want to amass as much wealth as possible, they don't want to give to others, they keep it all for themselves, become richer and richer. But many of those through whom they gain the riches have been exploited. And the poor, therefore, sometimes become poorer and poorer. And the gap between those who have and those who have not grows wider and wider and brings about great starvation and poverty. So that's one explanation. The other explanation is the heart of the wise man is to his right, that's Moshe Rabbeinu. And the heart of the fool is to the left. That is the tribe of Reuven and God. They made the main purpose of life to be secondary, and the secondary part of life, they made that the major. They loved possessions more than human beings, for them it was more important. How do we see it? It's revealed. Now, it's not revealed so openly. But Moshe Rabbeinu, he saw the seeds of this. In the suggestion of these two tribes, all the tribes are going to be prepared to cross the Yarden, as it says in the Chumash, and to be able to take over the land with the help of Hashem under Yeshua. But these tribes said, what do you mean? Hashem gave us, without much of a battle, the land of Sichon and Og in Transjordan. And there's such a lot of expanse of agricultural land, land for all our large flocks of sheep and cattle. That's how the parsha begins. Mikvnirav. They saw, a lot of possessions, a lot of means to become rich, and to immediately have, for everyone in our large population, to have them employment, have them very good profits, have wealth. And then we also need places for the children to develop the future, yes. But money is more important than children. We need both. So in this, Moshe Rabbeinu saw already, you're not going the right direction. Therefore he came with claims against them. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, you loved your possessions and wealth more than you loved human lives coming from you, even from your own family. By your life, blessing will not come upon you. Because it says in the book of Proverbs, if a person, he receives a fantastic inheritance and he takes hold of it quickly, I want to get that inheritance. And that's his main ambition. Let me get onto the list of billionaires. Its utter end will not be blessed. That's why it says further, don't work so hard to just enrich yourself materially. Keep away from that type of understanding. And who is a rich man? Who is happy with his portion. This is the purpose of Torah. But it continues, these verses, that wise people, they recognize life is more important than possessions, and especially life of virtue, because possessions, they frequently create corruption. There's a very kosher word brought in the essays of famous British essayists from a few hundred years ago called Bacon. But some of his words are quite kosher. For example, he said that adversity does best discover virtue. Prosperity does best discover vice. So, people become strong, a lot of possessions, they can exploit other people. And that, in the end, that leads to a society governed by corruption. But you can use wealth as a means to an end, as a means to help. So, why was this applied specifically to Bnei Reuven and Bnei Gad? In fact, the Midrash continues and says, what happened to these 2.5 tribes when Sancheriv came to conquer the whole Middle East? Whom did he take into exile first? These 2.5 tribes. The first Golut that came upon Am Yisrael, when they had the great benefit of having achieved all the tribes settled in the land of Israel, in the wider land of Israel. But they came then, even though there was a temple, the split between the south and the north. The northern ones were unfortunately frequently under wicked kings. They're very much under influence of the surrounding idolatry. And as Eliyahu said on the mountain of Carmel, he said, how long are you going to jump on 2 branches? If you believe in Hashem, follow him. If you don't believe it, follow the Baalim. Then go in the other direction, okay? So you want to leave everything. But you're all the time hesitating. And the ones who hesitated the most were these 2.5 tribes, because they're not so connected with the other tribes. So they were taken to exile first. 8 years before, Sancheriv had taken all the northern kingdom and dispersed them all over his empire. Known today as the lost 10 tribes. The first ones were the 2.5. 8 years later, the rest of them. And these have been lost to the people of Israel since then. And what's it come from? Because they were too materialistic. If you look carefully in this passage, it's pointed out, why is it that the sons of Reuven and the sons of God, Bnei Gad and Bnei Reuven, are mentioned 8 times? They say this is a hint. This is going to be the first Golut, as described in the book of Kings and the book of Chronicles. So now, there's something else connected with all this. We spoke in the previous year the name of Israel and explained that we don't find the word Israel by itself used in the historical works of the Tanakh, or even in non-Jewish works of the Tanakh. The name Israel as such is never used as a name for the whole country. And even when it was under kings, it was called Malchut Yehuda, after 10 tribes had disappeared. The northern one was called the Malchut Yisrael, not called Israel by itself, called the kingship of Israel, the northern tribes. It's also called Malchut Yehuda. But in the Tanakh, Eretz Israel is only used in the last books. Before then, it's given different names, Eretz Canaan or Eretz Oimori. And in the Second Temple period, it was generally speaking called Judea, Yehuda, because the major tribes of Israel disappeared, become lost. So from the Second Temple period onwards, all to the Middle Ages, it was called Judea, or it was called Palestine. And Jews, we Jews, called it Eretz Israel. It's only with the beginning of the state of Israel that it's even more defined as Israel. We explained there's no name in the world today that you will find repeated, to make any statistics, millions of times more than any other name is Israel. Even those who want to blot the name Israel from the world, but they're causing it to be used constantly. They say, we want to destroy Israel. Whereas it is mentioned in Tehillim. In Tehillim it said, before the Mashiach will come, that the nations will gather together if we don't do enough teshuvah. And their claim will be, Lo Yizacher Shem Yisrael Od, in Tehillim 83. That the name Israel should never be mentioned. And that's what they're trying to do in all their schools, in all their publications. No such thing Israel. That's why they're trying to remove from the land of Israel any signs from archaeology, which prove so much of Jewish presence here throughout the ages. They try their best to obliterate. It's all part of their method of falsifying Jewish history. I mean, if they falsify as they do, and even our so-called peace partners' doctorate is to prove there wasn't the Holocaust, when there's so much evidence, but they twist everything. So this is the situation with the name Israel. Now, we also explained that the name Israel was only given to our forefather Yaakov as his real name by Hashem when he, with his family, a clan, small clan, were about to go back to live in the land of Israel and settle there. That's when Hashem said, in future your name will not be Jacob, Yaakov, it will become Israel from now on. So we explained, we see this happening today. Before the Mashiach comes, the name, not just of the people, but of the place, will become Israel. Although it's a name that everybody knows, but few people understand what it means. So we've already spoken about the deeper meaning. It means the purpose of the people of Israel is to demonstrate that God rules the world. He is the highest prince, the highest king of all kings, of all powers that exist. And that's our purpose. It's for that reason that we have Israel. And surely that's what's expressed in all the symbols which the state of Israel took for themselves. We know, unfortunately, because of assimilation, the strong group amongst the people who want to keep alive the true meaning of the name Israel, they were outvoted. And therefore, they didn't put it into the Declaration of Independence, nor did they put it in the national anthem. But it's there as the menorah, and menorah means the light of God. That was so significant, menorah in the temple. And it's there in the flag, the blue and the white, which is the significance of the tzitzit, to remind us that our life has to be holy to God. That's what lies behind the sky blue with the white. And the Maggid David is really a menorah on a plane. It's also a menorah, Maggid David. Why is it called Maggid David? Because the shape of the menorah on the plane was on the shield which David HaMelech used in his battles, which represents the light of God. As it's also shown in the chapter 67 of Tehillim, where the structure in words and in letters follows the shape of the menorah. The six-sided star is the central shaft, the three branches on each side. So we see, that's it, that's the true meaning of Israel. But we have to live up to it. How do we live up to it? So here, I would say, to understand the passage we read on Shabbos with the repetitions, and what did Moshe Rabbeinu want from them? They said, okay. But even when they said, if you look in the passage, what did they say? They said, okay, we now you say we should put our children first. So Moshe Rabbeinu comes and says, the way you're speaking, that you say we don't have enough room for all our cattle, And even now, what we're going to wander with our cattle till we can get a piece of land this side of the Jordan. Let's take the other side of the Jordan. And they then said, yeah, we need more land. We need to make pens for our cattle. So Moshe says, first of all, you are following the sin of the spies. The spies have said, we don't want to go to the land of Israel because it's too difficult for us. That's what you're saying, the same thing. The real land of Israel is this side of the Jordan. And that's where there's going to be the place of divine worship, where Hashem will reveal himself through all the service of the temple. Why do you reject this? So he says, you had 40 years wandering to create a new generation, and the generation that complained about the difficulties of taking over the land. So you have arisen in verse 14 in chapter 22 in the place of your forefathers, a horde of sinful men, to bring more anger to Hashem, to the people of Israel. What's going to happen? He'll leave you in the desert and will destroy these people. Such a sharp rebuke. But Moshe Rabbeinu had insight in the future. That's what's going to happen, unless you change your whole approach. Your approach is not good enough. If you're coming to settle in the land of Israel, I'm going to apply it now how it applies today. If you're coming to settle in the land of Israel because you hope here you can make good living and you won't be persecuted by others, and that's why you're coming here, you're forgetting something. What was the sin of the spies? They also believed in Hashem. But they said, it's too difficult to live in the land of Israel. We rather want to live elsewhere. We've got plenty of room, we become rich easily, we make a fortune, and that's our purpose. Okay, we'll be a bit religious, but what will it lead to? It leads to assimilation. It leads with you also being cut off from the rest of the nation when you become assimilated too much. So I think this is being addressed not just to them, it's being addressed to us today. Anyone who wants to come to the land of Israel has to know that it might not be easy. But the purpose of the land of Israel is not for materialism. It's to fulfill a holy place which should have an influence on all mankind. Because look, let's see how it continues. They said, first of all, okay, we'll put the children first. And secondly, we promise that we're not going to go back to this area, and we're going to help the people of Israel. In fact, they said more. He said in verse 17, we're going to be chalutzim. They became chalutzim. You know the chalutzim? We'll be pioneers. Chalutz is a pioneer. Chalutzim in Israel, they're pioneers to build up the land, transform the desert into a blooming territory. So we're going to be chalutzim. In front of whom? In front of people of Israel. We're not going to just settle here. We'll fight with them if we need to. We'll go and stay with them. And we're not coming back home until all the tribes have their place. And then we want to come back to have this large area. So Moshe said to them, he said to them, oh, you want to become chalutzim? There's only one way. It's got to be livnei Hashem. You've got to be in front of Hashem. You've got to do it in front of Hashem. You have to go into battles. And if you look at even the Chumash and at the Rambam, that the battles which they were commanded to wage against the corrupt Canaanites were given the option. If you want to observe the Noachide code, no problem. But if you continue with idolatry, we have to fulfill the will of Hashem to transform this land from all its corruption, including Moloch worship, which means throwing the children into a fire and celebrating. Hashem will not allow such things to continue, because that destroys human life and the divine image of human being. People of Israel who battle here have to battle Lifnei Hashem, to make a sanctification in the name of Hashem, and if they do it completely, Hashem promises none of them will be hurt. So tzriach be chalutzim Lifnei Hashem. And then let every pioneer, he cross the yard in Lifnei Hashem until his enemies, the enemies of Hashem, have been destroyed. Because the whole purpose of the conquest of the land by Yeshua was to remove the enemies of Hashem from this central place which was built up to destroy the divine image, to remove the power of Hashem. So Hashem said, I made mankind my partner. The partner has to be the one who will bring blessing to mankind and not one who brings curses upon mankind. That was Avraham Avinu. And therefore, the purpose of Am Yisrael coming to Eretz Israel is not to remove the enemies of Israel. It's to remove the enemies of Hashem. And that's what they have to have in mind when they're going to war. And then you conquer the land, you settle the land. It's got to be Lifnei Hashem, he says. Then you can come back, then you'll be morally cleansed from Hashem and from the people of Israel, and then the land will belong to you, even for eternity. Lifnei Hashem. It's got to be in front of Hashem. And if you don't do this, that means if you're going to do all the things you mentioned, yes, but you're going to forget every stage of these important national aims have to be done. Lifnei Hashem, then you've sinned in front of Hashem. You should know that the sin will affect you. This sinfulness of forgetting Hashem will affect you and you'll disappear, which happened amongst the lost 10 tribes, the first ones to go. Said, yes, make sure you can build, and you should build, cities for your children, and also make pens and preparations for all your sheep and cattle, but you have to also fulfill your word in the way I've described, that it will be Lifnei Hashem. And that's why it says in verse 29 that Moshe said, he said again, the whole concept again, at the final declaration in the discussion, which was said, in the heads of all the heads of tribes of the children of Israel, that you've got to go as pioneers in the war in front of Hashem, so the land will be for you in front of Hashem. And in the end, they got the message. So this message, I think, applies. That's why there's many emphasis given that this is something which is an important message. Moshe Rabbeinu foresaw the future, and he took the message at the time, but not well enough. The truth, they did forget about Hashem, and they did start worshipping the Baalim, the nature gods, people around, all the 10 tribes, and they above all, and also they felt themselves separate from the other tribes. So the first Golut, the first tribes that got lost were these 2.5 tribes. They disappeared from the history books about the Jews. And today, in fact, because there's such a research done amongst the customs all over the world, so they found that there are remnants, ancient memories that come through with a custom here and there amongst people in South America, people in Africa, people in Asia. And then some people say, now that Israel's become famous, let's get back. We've got certain ancient traditions of certain customs that were once entrenched in our ancient ancestors. So it says this in the prophets. It says it. It said, "Uvahu avdim be'eretz Ashur." Let those who became lost in the Assyrian lands. It was the Assyrian Empire under Sancheriv. They believed, as their general policy, they conquered the land. They want to make sure there shouldn't be a rebellion against them. So therefore, they took over the land and they took away all the population, miles and miles away, into a different continent, far away from where they lived before. They should disappear there amongst the other nations. And they brought some distant nation to settle the land. So that's what Sancheriv did. He did that. He brought the Kusim. And the same thing happened with Nebuchadnezzar. So that's the lost 10 tribes. But today we're seeing Uvahu avdim. It says on that day, before the Mashiach comes, they're going to blow with a big shofar, mentioned in our daily prayer. We say, Tekah b'shofar gadol, please Hashem, blow the big shofar for our freedom. What the big shofar? It's the big Teshuvah movement, which frees the Jewish people, which frees them from their bonds, which has caused them to assimilate and disappear and drown amongst the nations of the world. Both the lost 10 tribes, and the remaining tribes also got lost. So many of them, over the generations, got lost. Many were killed, and some of them assimilated completely into different civilizations. But they'll come back. Both as Nidachim, both those that still know they're Jewish, but they've got nothing to do with Judaism or with the land of Israel, and they even oppose it. The thing is, why should Jews? So there are movements today of Jews who say, we don't need Israel. Yeah? But let's just be Jews. They may be holding fast, many of them, or Hashem, to some of the principles of the Noahide Code, which are always strong amongst the people of Israel. But they say we don't need a separate nation at all. Yeah? Let's be like the other nations, only be civilized. But the Jewish people got a special message. In order there should be civilization on strong rocks, which are recognized as absolute truth and absolute moral principles, then we're on shifting sands. And then you'll find that people call evil good and good evil. That's happening today. So this is therefore a big message for us today, because we could say one of the most important principles. We have to change the image in the eyes of the civilized nations, and in contrast to those who destroy civilization. In many ways, Israel is doing it, but we could do it tenfold as much as is being done. I mean, it's those who are willing to be objective recognize that the whole policy of Israel has always been to help people who are starving, who are wounded, all over the world. And we'll still do that. That's being done by Jews all over, also supported by the state. But capitalism has replaced the more socialist spirit of the Torah, which existed when the state was established. And today, the gap between the multimillionaires in Israel and the poor is growing. That's under the influence of the so-called economic success of capitalist society that maybe give the overall state more abilities, but it's got to be channeled in such a way strengthening taxation on the rich in order to have a more equal distribution of whatever national wealth exists, which is part of the social code of the Torah, which is being ignored. All the laws of Maisa, of Golut today, and there's many people ignore it. It's got to be introduced in the education from childhood upwards, and it isn't introduced, so that young people, they think my main purpose in life, I want to go into the business with the talents Hashem has given me to become part of the Forbes list. That's their aim. Or some people say, I just want to be able to enjoy life and have fun. You know, that also, I'm just out for enjoyment. Have fun now and pay later. That's the policy. The American persuasive materialism is engulfing the social life of the people of Israel, even the kibbutzim that wants really a real atmosphere of giving instead of taking. So this is the chesed lifnei Hashem, which we have to introduce in the country. And then we've got to bring the recognition that you'll only put it on a strong basis with the word of Hashem, the Torah given to the people of Israel. So that is really the task which faces, whom does it face mainly? Who's got to be the main recipient of this message? Many people will say, okay, all the Chavei Knesset have to know it. Sorry. How will they know it? They'll only know it if those of us who are so fortunate to be able to study Torah and to improve our characters, because that's one of the essences of Torah, and improve our behavior, knowing thereby we find favor in the eyes of Hashem. V'item dekim me Hashem Yisrael. It goes together. We've got to always try with kindness and help to bring people, like Avraham Avinu did, to come to clear acceptance of the way of Hashem, the Derech Hashem. And to bring this also, that Jews should not be ashamed, they should be proud of the fact that we are referred to as the people of Hashem. And there's so many hints for this. I think a most significant hint, what happened last week, that there's a claim, I don't quite know whose, but just read the headlines, I don't know much more, you might be able to fill it in. But I know the Balfour Declaration, which made the Brits in charge of the mandate to build a Jewish home here, so this was recognized by the leaders of the Jewish people as a smile from Hashem. And it was certainly based upon, at that time, in Great Britain, there was a great respect for the Bible. And they believed the Bible was, nevertheless, contains truth. And this was the support we had from the League of Nations. And Britain took it up. But when, now we've got our enemies who are bringing a court case, I think, at the International Court of Hague, against Great Britain for reducing the Balfour Declaration. And perhaps it's our fault, because we don't emphasize enough the big biblical connection. Whenever a representative of Israel has spoken to international debates or different powers and is brought from the Bible, it's had a big effect, even until today. I mean, the Tanya speech, I mean, which is so much controversial, she gave in America, which was seemed to be against, a little bit against Obama, but where did he get the most clapping? When he said, God should bless America. Because that's how they end the speeches in America. He's not ashamed. to mention the name of God. But in Israel, in the parliament, you can't mention it. Why? Because if you mention the name of God, then they'll say, some anti-anti, therefore they'll say, you know, you're making Israeli policy interfering into the separation between religion and state. This is something, there's no way in which you can divide the people of Israel from God. And the nations of the world recognize it. The nations who believe in morality. And those who don't believe in morality, they're bringing life on earth to an end. They're trying to. So let us choose life. I think that's an important message. From the first Golut until the present Golut, to bring us to Geula. Because ultimately, the difference in Hebrew between Geula, exile, and Geula is the Aleph. The Aleph is the one above. You don't even pronounce the Aleph, because Hashem is beyond language. But He's the one behind language, and behind thought, and behind communication, and also behind the future peace of the world, as inscribed in the prophets and on the side of the United Nations building. There will only be United Nations if they will learn to follow, as it says there, to learn the ways of God from the people of Israel. Amen.
Amen.